To help us break down all of this, I'm joined from Fort Lauderdale by Seth Kaplan. He's a managing partner with Airline Weekly. Seth, welcome.
Hi, Asiye.
So how are the airlines faring so far? Is there a particular airline that's doing better, and why?
Yeah, well, sometimes two separate questions are how are they doing financially and how are they doing operationally? But U.S. airlines in general are doing a pretty good job with both these days. I mean, they're making as much money as they've ever made, and they're generally running reasonably reliable operations. Of course, challenged today by some of the holiday storms, especially in the New York area. But in general, a rather good time for the industry in the U.S., not so much some of the counterparts for these airlines abroad.
So, Seth, when the weather gets nasty, when we have a winter storm to deal with, financially, does that help the airlines, or is that not a good thing for them?
It doesn't help them, but they deal with it differently than they used to in the past. I mean, it used to create this operational mess where you just sort of had airplanes and airline employees stranded everywhere, and it took a long time to recover. Nowadays, airlines are more likely, partly for legal reasons, to proactively cancel those flights. To just say, you know what, let's just try again tomorrow, basically, with some of them. And what that does leave all the people in place. And to your point about can it actually help them? Well, you know, when you're flying less, you're burning less fuel. So sometimes, depending on when it happens, you basically consolidate more travelers onto fewer flights, and you can have some cost savings. But that's during low demand periods that airlines benefit from that. When it's a holiday period, you know, in the end, some people don't end up traveling, and that's bad for airlines. It's only good when they get almost all the revenue, but they save on some of the costs.
You mentioned fuel. Let's talk about low oil prices. Will they translate to cheaper airline tickets for you and me, for consumers, and what does it mean for airline investors?
Yeah, I'm afraid not directly. It's not as if airlines just pass along those costs straight through the consumers in the same way that we are, at least fortunately, saving money when we put fuel in our cars, for example. You know, airlines, I mean, it's simple supply and demand economics, basically. You have the traveling public that's willing to pay a certain amount to fly, and airlines put a certain amount of capacity into the market, seats basically, and the fares fall where they do. Now, what can happen is when fuel is cheaper, airlines might decide to simply fly a little more, to grow a little more, because the economics change a little bit. And when they do that, if they put more seats into the marketplace, then again, supply and demand, you know, the average fares can tend to come down. So as a consequence of airlines growing perhaps a little bit more than they planned in the coming months, fares could come down. But it's not as if right now we're seeing lower fares just because fuel is cheaper.
So 2015, Seth, is right around the corner. What should, again, consumers expect globally from airlines?
Yeah, consumers can expect more of the same. You know, the U.S. airlines have really kind of figured this game out. They've learned how to do what we at Airline Weekly call the 3 C's, and we call it, you know, it's capacity controls. Like I said, just really managing that supply and demand, consolidation, all those mergers that we've seen, and charging extra for almost everything, all the bag fees and everything else. And airlines around the world are kind of looking at the U.S. right now and saying, you know, that's working. Let's do that. So for investors, it's mostly a good story. For consumers, a little bit more of a mixed bag. We are paying more to fly, but at least we are getting what we pay for in terms of, as I said, you know, more reliable operations, and airlines that, because they're making money, are at least able to reinvest in their product. You know, you get on a plane these days in the U.S. and it's not that dirty old airplane that it was maybe 10 years ago, because airlines finally are not just struggling to get through the day, but we are paying for it.
Seth, and finally, very quickly, if you had to come up with 3 tips every traveler needs to know this season, what would it be? And quickly, we're getting out of time.
Yeah, good question. Well, you know, when things go wrong, let's focus on that. When the weather is bad, what can you do? One thing, tell the airline how flexible you are. Airlines nowadays do a pretty good job of finding that next seat if your flight is canceled on the next available flight. But, you know, if you're supposed to fly to LaGuardia and you don't mind flying to, you know, Newark or JFK instead, tell them that. That might help you get to where you're going faster. Another thing, you know, technology is great when it works, but once in a while when things go wrong, they go very wrong. So keep a paper copy of your itinerary just in case. And, you know, if they tell you, hey, go get on that line over there for, to get reaccommodated, get in the line, but call also. A lot of people fighting for that one last seat, and however you can get through to the airline, whether it's in person or by phone, it gives you a better shot at doing that.
Great tips. Thank you so much, Seth Kaplan.
Thank you, Asier.